Being recalled. Okay. All right. Got it. Let me see. How do I get into? Okay. Hold on a little bit. Okay. Close caption. Participant. Uh, okay. I need to. Hold on. Hold on. Let me do some adjustments.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Here I have it. Here I have it. Well, okay. Now, since you're going to listen to Professor Narveson to talk about the life of Turing and also going to watch a movie, so I'm going to just talk about Turing's work and also a little bit about cryptology. Okay. All right. So today I limit myself to Turing's scientific work, then the cryptology during the Second World War, and also cryptology as used now in modern times. If time permit, I'm also going to speak a little bit about error correction code. That's another part of the coding theory affect everybody's life. About Turing's scientific work, well, he did quite a few different things. I think the most important and influential is something called Turing's machine and also Turing's test, in addition to his cracking of the German military code. Now, let me first start on Turing machine, the so-called Turing machine. Where to understand the significance of Turing machine, we need to talk a little bit about the so-called Hilbert's decision problem. The great mathematician Hilbert posed a problem in 1928. The problem is that given a mathematical statement, is it possible to find an algorithm to determine whether the statement is valid or invalid, okay, whether the statement is true or not true? Now, this was a big problem. You might say that this was sort of the dream of all the mathematicians. Well, actually, it's perhaps more important for people who use mathematics. Because the so-called decision problem is to determine whether the statement is true or not true. It does not require any proof for the statement. Also, Hilbert's original problem that just asked for an algorithm to decide whether the statement is true, and the algorithm is not necessarily carried out by a person. It could be carried out by a machine. Actually, it could be carried out by a future machine, a powerful machine that not existent now, could be existing in the future. Now, this was a problem very difficult to solve. And since any algorithm, including machine in the future, well, we don't even have the machine yet. How do we know we can find a method to determine whether the statement is true or not true? Well, Turing learned about this problem. At that time, he was a youngster, just over 23, 24. He tried to look at the problem. Now, instead of looking at the problem in the future, he asked, what is the essence in computing with a machine? So he invented the so-called Turing machine. At that time, it's not called. He didn't call the machine Turing machine. He just called it a universal A machine. A stands for automatic machine. Now he asked, what is the essence of computing operation? Now he decided that any machine, including the future power machine, just doing 4 different things. So you have a machine look at a long strip of zeros and ones. So you look at one of the number at a time. Then the machine only needs to do 4 things. Move one plate to the right, or move one plate to the left, change it 1 to 0, or change it 0 to 1. Any machine, no matter how complicated the machine is essentially just doing one of these 4 things. Now, if a machine just do one of these 4 things, it's called a Turing machine, called a Turing universal machine. Any machine can be reduced to a Turing machine. Based on the Turing machine, he can answer that the Hilbert decision problem cannot be solved by any machine, including the future machine. The answer is no. No such algorithm is possible. So this was a very important piece of work of mathematics. At that time, there was another professor in Princeton, Professor Alonzo Church, also solved the problem, also gave a negative answer. And Turing's solution was much simpler. And Professor Church was quite famous at that time, already established internationally famed professor. So he invited Turing to Princeton. So Turing became his student and complete PhD degree. Turing at that time only 24 years old, just out of Cambridge University. So he became a Church student and finished a doctorate degree. Now, actually, I learned my mathematical logic from another student of Church, Professor Robert Ricci. Well, anyway, so he solved Hilbert's decision problem. Actually, the Turing machine is used elsewhere also. Use the machine, people later on solve the so-called halting problem, and whether is a way to decide that a computer program become cyclic and never-ending, this kind of thing. This you can also solve with Turing machine. So Turing machine was a very important discovery. Another thing that he was famous for was Turing test. The Turing test was a test trying to answer the problem that can machine think. You know, nowadays we try to study the artificial intelligence. We try to make a machine which behaves like a person. So one important question is, can machine really think? Now, when Turing looked at this problem, this was still in 1950. He didn't really have the big computer as we have nowadays. So the question, at that time, people didn't really realize the importance of the question. But nowadays, so this has become a more and more important question. Can machine really think? Can machine really do things like a person? Well, Turing published a paper in the journal Mind. Well, he didn't call this Turing test. He called it the Imitation Game. Now, his idea to test whether the machine can think or not is try to invite a machine and let the machine imitate to be a person and see whether we can tell the difference. So if you have a machine, so you put the machine behind a curtain, okay? So you can ask whatever question you want to ask the machine and let the machine answer. See whether you can tell the difference. Now, Turing's idea is that after you ask all the questions you want and couldn't tell the difference, whether it's a machine or a person, then you have to agree that the machine can think. Because after all, this is how we use to decide whether another person can think or not. We just ask questions and see whether the person can answer. If we cannot tell the difference, then we have to agree that the machine can think. So this test is called the Turing test. Okay, and also the title of the movie called Imitation Game, because that's how he used to tell whether the machine can think. Now, so later on, people call this Turing test. Now, from the Turing test, there's also called Turing competition that organized and to test the ability of computers, especially software. Now, these are for the Turing competition no longer available now, but it lasts from 1990 until 2009. They invite all the computers to participate in the competition. So in front of a panel of specialists, if the computer can fool the specialist, then you win the competition. They call it Loebner Prize. It's actually pretty interesting. You can still look up the past competition and see what kind of question people ask and how the computer answer, whether it can win the prize or not. Well, of course, nowadays a lot of people do not just accept Turing tests to see whether the machine can think or not. So there's still a lot of dispute nowadays. And so the so-called important objection is so-called the Chinese. Oh my goodness, the Chinese are a misspelled Chinese. Well, anyway, you call the Chinese room experiment. Now this is given by Professor Searle at Berkeley. Now, nowadays, of course, we know the computer which can accept or answer in Chinese. Well, according to the Turing machine, all the computer does is one of these four things, move one place to the left, one place to the right, change 1 to 0, 0 to 1. Searle claimed that, well, he could do all these things too. So if instead of machine, well, okay, if a machine can answer in Chinese, then he just, instead of the machine, he just hides behind the curtain and does everything the machine does. So people may think that he was able to answer questions in Chinese and deduce that he can speak Chinese. But Searle says that he couldn't understand any word in Chinese. So that means that computer may do something without truly understanding. So, the computer may pass the Turing test, but without true understanding. So he sort of did not accept the Turing test. As I said, that it's still a pretty hot topic, especially in the theory of cognition, where the computer can really think like a person. Well, I have very limited time, so let me just move on to cryptology. For cryptology, there's three important concepts that involved. One, to carry out a coding system, you need to encode, to put in a plain text into secret code, and decode for the receiver to get back to the plain text. Then there's a third concept called deciphering. That's an unauthorized person trying to break the code. All right, the code, the secret code, had a long history. What I'm going to talk about is several items related to the code. Start with the simplest code called substitution code. Now, these are a little history about cryptology. So substitution, then and the modular code, and finally scramble. That the code used by Germany during Second World War. The coding, the first one is called substitution code. That had a long history. It's supposedly to start with Julius Caesar. That's a really long time ago. You can also see the substitution code in novels and movies, okay, in literature. Now here is an example of a substitution code. Okay, you can still read about the story in Sherlock Holmes. And the title of the short story is called Adventure of the Dancing Man. Now here, some person uses a set of special symbol to hide a true message. Now here are more symbols. Okay, so apparently each symbol stands for an alphabet, and Sherlock Holmes was able to bring the code. I use the same message and lure the criminal here and solve the case. But if you use a substitution code like this, it's very clumsy and not very efficient, because you have to draw those little figures for the alphabet, and you have to have a code book to remember which symbol represents which alphabet. So during the First World War and Second World War, people used a much improved version of this. So instead of use arbitrary symbols, so why don't we just use the symbol we're familiar with? Okay, why not just use the alphabet that we're using? So the first kind of code they use called shifting code. Shifting code, we still use alphabet, A, B, C, D, up to Z, okay, except we shift a particular number of places. Now here, this is an example for shifting for 3 places. A, if you follow A, goes three places down, A, B, C, D. So 3 places down, so use D to substitute A, then E for B, F for C. So you have A, B, C, D, now represented by D, E, F, G, H. But after you run out of the alphabet, then you return to A, B, C again. So you see the 26 alphabet are now represented by 26 symbols. This way, you don't have to use special symbol. You don't have to memorize any special, you don't have to use a code book. All you need to shift your alphabet a number of places down. Okay. Now in this, it can be a very nice code. For instance, if you have a message, or meet me at 10, the M, okay, 3 places down, M, N, O, P, so M going to be replaced by P. E is by H, okay. T is by W, okay. So meet me at 10 now becomes the secret message here. This is nice. You don't have to have a code book. All you just remember how many places to shift down. Actually, I read about in First World War, there a pair of agents, okay, they use this shifting code. Now they actually use a pretty ingenious method. You don't have to memorize how many places down, and you can change the number of places, number of shifting units from day to day. So what they did is that each agent bring the same edition of a book. For instance, like a Bible, okay, the same edition of the Bible. Then depending on the date of that day, they make the communication. For instance, today is October 26th. So we just turn to page 26 of the Bible. Look at the first word. See how many alphabet used in the first word. If the first word is beautiful, then you count how many alphabet in the word, then you shift how many places down. And this is quite nice. Okay, you can change the code from day to day, so it's harder to break. However, this has a major drawback. If someone break one of the letter, then they break the whole system, because if you know what A is, then B is the next letter, C is the next letter, and so on and so forth. So if you break one, you break it all. Therefore, they later on improved this into the so-called modular code. Okay, they had to use mathematics. To use mathematics, the first thing is that you have to change everything into a number. Okay, so first represent all the alphabet by numbers. Okay, so 1 to 26. Okay. Then, okay, the shifting code is that for each X, you just add a fixed number of places. Now, if you add, for instance, W, you want to shift 5 places, then you run out of the numbers. You plot 5, you get 28. You don't have 28. So if you more than 26, you go around back. Okay, so you just subtract 26, look at the remainder, look at what's left. Okay, so you 28 and then become 2. Now this mathematics is called modular system, like the system we use for our clock. 9 o'clock, you add 5 hours later, you add 5 to 9, then it's more than 12, you just subtract 12, look at the remainder. So this was the old code. But this, as I said, this is not good enough, because once you break one of the letter, you break it all. But now if these are numbers, you can do more fancy things with a number. You choose some number which doesn't share any factor with 26. Then you can multiply, okay, if you have an original character, you change that into a number, you multiply by m, then plus b. So they call linear modular. This is much harder to break, okay, because once you break one letter, the next letter may not be the one available. You have to multiply, and sometimes the number big, you have to return back. Okay, this is how you decode it. Okay. So they call modular code. Okay, so this is still easy to use. Okay, easy to use, and all you need to remember the shifting unit that can be changed from day to day. You memorize the number m to remember 2 numbers. But it has disadvantage. The disadvantage is that it's still easy to decipher, because you always use the same symbol for the same text, for the same character. All right, and there's a lot of study being devoted to breaking such code. So you look at the symbols that in your secret text and see how many symbols used how many times. For instance, the English letter E appear more than any other. E, okay, this is 13%. Z only 0.1%. Y a little bit more because we use the yes a lot. Okay, X and the Z used very infrequently. So from the relative frequency of appearance, you can use statistic method to break the code. Now here is another study, use 2-letter combination. Okay, so using the statistical ways, you can still break the code. So people need to have some more secure method. The secure method is to scramble. This is the way Germans used in their secret code system. So you use symbol to represent text. In the process, you scramble the letter to show you how you can do the scrambling. Okay, I'm going to show you one example. Suppose, okay, now first of all, you still represent the letters by numbers. Actually, people are doing this in a little more fancy way. If you do this, you can separate word so people can tell this from the space, the length of the word easy to break. So you also use a symbol like 00 for the space. Then you can put all the message in one row of numbers. All right. So if we look at the linear modular code, even the linear modular code use the same formula, then you see you still have the weakness. The same character by the same symbol. Here, ATTA, the A appears twice. In the secret code, the symbol also appears twice, H and H. TT, so it becomes YY. So you can still use the statistical study to break the code. All right. Now, one way that we can scramble the message to use the matrix multiplication. I don't know whether you learned matrix multiplication or not. Sometimes we can learn this in pre-calculus or in linear algebra. So you can multiply a sequence of numbers by matrix by using the rows of the matrix with these numbers. Okay, so 1 times 1, 0 times 20, 2 times 20, so you get 41. Use the second row for these three numbers to get a second element. Oh my goodness, I made a mistake here. 2 times 1, 1 times 20, 2 times 20. It should be 62. It's not it's not 42. Well, this is unintended scrambling. Unintended. Okay. Well, anyway, you multiply matrix. Now you put your message, you separate your message into phrases. So because the matrix is 3 by 3, so into a sequence of 3. Okay, 3 units. 1, 20, 20, or 1, 20, 20. It's being sent to secret code. Then this 1, 3, 11. Okay, in the next step. Okay, into the code. Well, in the code, you see that the same letter are no longer by the same symbol. Okay, so the ATGA now become OPDW. The two A's are by two different symbols. The T's also different symbol. The reason is that, okay, if you look at the T, for instance, the first T is here today. In order to get to 42, you have to use the symbol before it, the symbol after it, because you have to multiply this by 2, this by 20, this by 2, then add this up. Okay, so it depends on the position of the symbol. You get different secret code. So this is pretty ingenious. But this is not the system used by German. German, they use a machine called Enigma. They use a sequence of rotors. Okay? And these are the little pack put in the holes. Then they use electricity, use the machine to do the scrambling. So this introduced certain randomness in the scrambling. But it cannot be completely random. But because it's completely random, then the receiver cannot decode the message. So if any system, it has to follow some logic. So it can still be a crack if people have enough of the information. As a matter of fact, an earlier version of Enigma was broken by a team of Polish mathematicians. And so they even erect some monument in the Polish city of Poznan. The city of Poznan still have these monuments. But German, this was in the beginning of the Second World War. German later improved their system, add another rotor, and it couldn't be deciphered by the Allies. And the final version was broken by Turing. You're going to say to watch this in the movie. They add another rotor. But after okay, this is a statue of Turing in England. So finally, he broke the Enigma machine, and this was a deciding factor in Allies' victory. So I want to talk a little bit about the cryptology in modern times. Let me look at the time I have. Oh, where do I still have time? Do I still have some time? Well, maybe I use another a few minutes to talk very briefly. The crypto system nowadays, or email or medical record or bank account, all protected by the secret code. But the code that we use nowadays are very different from the secret code of old times, because the old code requires some code book, so you have to have a different system for each player for each collaborator, and this is not convenient. And we want to have a system that consists of two parts. One part, the encoding part, can be made public. Everybody can use the system to code a secret message to you, and you're the only one can read the message. In other words, if you're in a banking business, you want everybody to be able to send money to you, but you're the only one to get the money out. Or you information, you want everybody to send the message to you, and you're the only one who can read the message. So there's two. You will try to separate this into two different parts. Okay, and this one. But it's hard to find such a process, because most of the coding system we knew, if you know how to encode it, you know how to decode it. It just reverse the process. So finally, someone thought about a system called the trapdoor system. The trapdoor, you go through the trapdoor, go one way, you can never come back. All right, so then these two different teams try to develop a trapdoor system. One is RSA system, one is called knapsack system. So, well, let me just briefly introduce this. The RSA system is a system still being used, developed at MIT, the knapsack system Stanford. There was some competition between these two. They even had a bet. Whoever won the final win, and the other party is going to give them a year of subscription of Playboy magazine. So you see, even though they're pretty smart mathematicians, but in some ways they're still immature youngsters. Finally, the RSA system won. The system, well, I don't have time to go through the mathematics. The system basically using something called Euler method and the Euclidean algorithm. Basically, they have two keys. Okay. From a method, you can read this to some power, modulo m. Then to decode, you read to another power. And it's very difficult to find this power. Okay, well, I'm supposed to just talk about half hour. So instead of going through different, the cryptology, let me just move to the final. Okay, well, this is how it works. Let me just move this to the final one. Okay, to talk a little bit about the error. Error correction code. Now, these are used in the supermarket code, in the actually using a lot of code, including yeah, this is how it works. I don't have time. Okay, then finally go to the so-called QR code. Now, the important feature about this is that they all have a error detection or correction element built in the code itself. During the transmission, if there's any error, the code can allow you to detect there's an error, can even find what the original code is. Now, the newer version, the QR code, even if part of the code was damaged, missing, you can still recover the code. And this is pretty amazing. And it's the same kind of process used in the CD. Now, in old times, we have record, the plastic record. If you make a scratch of it, you're going to listen to the scratch every time you play to the place. But in modern CD, a compact disc, you can actually drill a hole on your compact disc as long as the hole is no greater than 0.3 millimeter. When you put in your device to play the compact disc, you wouldn't even be able to detect the little hole because the disc itself detects the error and fill in the lost information. Okay, so I better quit now because there's another talk before you watch movie. All right, so this is all this I plan to talk today. Okay.
Fantastic.
Sorry for the rush, but one maybe there's some other occasion that maybe I can continue.
Yeah, no, that was really wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Ho. We definitely benefited from that, and it gives us some amazing context to understand the elements of the film. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this and coming in and talking to us. I think it's been fantastic.
Okay.
Cool.
My pleasure.
So if you want to stick around, you can. Professor Narveson is going to come up here and talk about the history of it, or if you got to go, that's okay too. But it's been a real pleasure having you.
I stay on to listen to the next talk.
Okay, that sounds good. And let's see, are we done with recording?
Or do they want to record me?
Are you okay with me?
There'll be a fee involved. No, that's fine.
All right.
You can record me.
Excellent. So we've got Dr. Narveson coming up. You have the floor.
So first thing is, why need an Enigma machine? Why need this thing?
That's like edit one.
Uh-oh, we need to mute him. If you go back to World War I, the way troops communicated with each other, units communicated even diplomatically and so on, is by either radio, what they called back then wireless, or phone, a hard wire, which could easily be broken, just snipping the wire, and the radio wasn't that reliable. And here's what the Germans faced that they learned from World War I, which was, if you've got remote units out there, like submarines, U-boats, and actually U-boat stands for Unterseeboot in German, which means under the ocean boat, or the ship. And so you have those remote, and there's no way to talk to them. In World War I, sub crews were on their own. They went and sailed. There's no way to communicate with the home. They wanted to be able to communicate. The Germans realized we want to be able to communicate with our subs to make them work better as groups to defeat the American ships that are coming over with all the supplies to Britain. We call them wolf packs. So that's one. Another, Air Force. World War I, it was just guys, at an air base flying a little ways, fighting, coming back. Now you're going to have more long range flights, and you're going to have air bases moving, especially on the Russian front, where you have long distances, and you're not going to run a phone line every time to that air base. It'd be much easier to be able to communicate in another way. And then also when you're talking to large command units like armies and corps and so on, and you need to communicate a general, it's kind of like when you send an email and you CC a whole bunch of other people. Wouldn't it be easier to send it by code by an Enigma machine to several recipients rather than a singular recipient. And so for the Germans, because they're going to use a different style of warfare in World War II, blitzkrieg as it's called, they're going to need a way to communicate to their units out there in the field, be there on the high seas or air bases that are moving about, or even troops and larger, higher commands. So this is why they need it. By the way, you can see an Enigma machine right here in the Silicon Valley. There's one at the Mountain View Museum of Computers. So I've seen it there because I've been to that museum. So you can actually look at one and see what it looks like. There's lots, well, I didn't say lots. There are many that still exist because we captured them at the end of World War II. And so as Dr. Ho said, it would be easy to make one of these. The physical, you know, it's a mechanical machine. So they made thousands and thousands of these things. And where they use them, obviously, is air bases and submarines. This is why when you're fighting the U-boats in World War II, a U-boat was under the orders not to allow your ship to be captured. You scuttle the boat, you detonate the ship, or at least, if not, there was always a hammer, a big heavy hammer next to the Enigma machine. And so if you were going down or you thought you were going to get captured, you're supposed to, you know, break glass in case of emergency kind of thing and pound the machine and break it all up so that the Allies couldn't get it. Now, what you're going to see in the film is they have a working Enigma machine that was snuck out of Germany just at the beginning of the war, and they're going to work with that. The Germans didn't know this, but the Germans always worried about being able to crack it, as you heard from Dr. Ho. So that's why they changed the code at midnight every night. So imagine having to start all over again every day trying to crack a code, because now it's switching to a new cipher. And so I was thinking about this. I was having this conversation with my colleagues about a week ago here about, is there something similar to this? And yeah, there is. In the 1820s, Jean-Francois Champollion, a man in his early 30s, cracked hieroglyphics. And if you know the story of how he did this, and I'll be very brief, it was the Rosetta Stone. And no, it's not the company today that helps you learn how to learn another language. The Rosetta Stone was found by accident by French troops in 1799, and it was a piece of a much larger proclamation carved onto stone in 3 languages. At the top, it was done in hieroglyphics. In the center, it was done in Demotic, which no one knew, and hieroglyphics no one knew. And at the bottom, it was in ancient Greek, which everybody knew. And so, and Demotic, by the way, is like it's like a cursive form of hieroglyphics. It's like the fast way to write.
Well, what is hieroglyphics?
Hieroglyphics is the picture writing of ancient Egypt. And so Champollion was trying to figure out a way to crack this. And there's a reason why I'm doing this, because it relates to what you see in the film. He found a cartouche. The cartouche is the name of a pharaoh. It designates the name of the pharaoh. So you're going to have something inside here in hieroglyphic. And if it's surrounded by a circle with a line on it, on the side, that is the name of a pharaoh. So he looked at these cartouches and thought, there's got to be something unique about that. And he went down into the text, which was the same text in Greek, and found names of pharaohs and took a leap and decided, okay, if this pharaoh here is named and I move up to here, how can I use those symbols to match the sounds here and the letters here in Greek? And then he's got something to start to work with to crack this. And that's how he basically cracked the code. The cartouche gave it away, because it was a culture that believed that you must have that name circled because it's holy and it's divine and so on. Consistency. And I mention this again because in the film, you're going to see the same problem. They're trying to crack this code, and then the time runs out, and then you got to start all over again because the clock is running every day. So what cartouche can you find, can Turing and his team find? And they're dealing with a country that is also consistent with the way they do things. German culture is very follow the rules. It's just a natural thing with Germans is they follow the rules. And the German military is like that times 10. So for example, they'll show you in the film, and I don't want to give away all the plot, but they show you in the film that at 6 a.m. every morning comes out a weather report. Why would you need this? Because troops in the field need it, submarines need it to know how, what the sea is going to be like for them and so on. So they're going to see the same letters. Mm-hmm. In German it is Wetterbericht. And so if they look for these letters, and then the weather report at the bottom always has the same message at the end. Heil Hitler. And because the German military is consistent, like the cartouche, they already have a bit of a crack that morning. And now they start looking for the same commonalities what Dr. Ho was talking about. And this allows them to crack the code using weather report, Wetterbericht, and Heil Hitler as the two commonalities. So there's a common story here between Turing and his team and Champollion. So what's the effect of this when they crack this code, which I saw the film a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to date it as in when does this happen? It seemed to me it happens in the spring of 41, somewhere is when they finally figure out how to do this, that the Turing machine can do this because he can plug in each morning this. He can plug in his cartouche each morning, and then it'll come up with a code within a few hours because he's already broken part of it. Only because you've got a culture that is consistent and does the same thing every day. Well, Germans are still kind of this way today, right? You don't get too many traffic tickets in Germany because everybody follows the rules. But so what's the effect on the war? Well, they also go on about this too. Once you've cracked their code, you want to keep it a secret that you've cracked their code. You don't want to let on that you know. But on the other hand, you want to use the information that you've cracked to help win the war. So they have to be selective. And so sometimes I'll give you two examples where they did use Enigma information. And one was the Battle of El Alamein, which was a turning point battle in World War II in the deserts of North Africa, in which General Montgomery, later elevated to Field Marshal, beat Rommel and basically stopped the German offensive against Egypt. Well, Montgomery got all sorts of praise. As a matter of fact, he became an earl after the war. He was knighted, all this kind of stuff because, wow, what a brilliant guy, Well, he had all the information. He knew exactly what the Africa Corps had in terms of gasoline, number of tanks, how much ammunition, and so on, because it had all been in an Enigma message. So he's sitting there looking at all that information. He knew exactly where all the placement of the troops, the enemy troops were, and he could now work with that information. Of course, you couldn't let that on because then it would tell the Germans you have the code. And the Germans never knew that their code had been broken because no submarine had ever been captured. Well, actually one was. U-505 was captured in June of 1944. U-505 was captured off the coast of North Africa and towed to Bermuda, where it was hidden in Bermuda from the eyes of any other submarines that could see it. And the Enigma machine was intact. Well, it turned out we already knew what all it did is just help us crack the code, confirm that we had cracked the code. But we couldn't let the Germans know that we captured their sub. So literally the crew was interned in a special camp in Louisiana, and they were listed as dead, reported to the Red Cross as dead. They weren't allowed to get any letters or anything like this. And it was not till 1947 that these guys went home and, to their families went, I'm not dead. Because you had to keep it a secret that you'd captured the sub. U-505 is in Chicago. If you want to go to the Museum of Technology there, it's the best example of a submarine, a U-boat submarine in existence today, well preserved and so on. And it was the one we'd captured some other subs too, but they had busted up their Enigma machines before we could get control of the sub. But this one had one intact. And of course, at the end of the war, many German subs surrendered at the end of the war, and then we got their intact Enigma machines, and as well as air units and so on that were overrun in the last months of the war. We could capture their Enigma machines. But another effect is D-Day. We had to try to trick the Germans into thinking we were going to land at the Pas de Calais, which was the closest point to the coast of Great Britain. It would be a natural place to make your invasion because the coastline was good. It was a good place for landing troops. Plus, your troops in their boats would be in the boats the shortest period of time, less likely to get damaged and so on, or sunk in the channel. And so the Germans thought that's where we were going to attack, and we made sure, because we kept checking their Enigma messages about how they talked about putting reserves and so on towards the Pas de Calais. And so we added to the deception by literally creating a false army with inflatable tanks, this kind of thing, so that German planes could take pictures of this and confirm, yeah, look at that. Wow, look at all those troops built up. And we even had guys create phony radio traffic and talk to each other on the radio, encoded, to make it seem like this whole army was sitting there waiting. And when in reality, we invaded at Normandy, hundreds of miles to the west, to deceive them. So, Enigma was useful there because it confirmed for us how much the Germans were being duped. But there were some things that Enigma, it didn't matter, because some parts of the German military didn't use it. And so, like, for example, the whole entire Holocaust system, the death camp system, was not on Enigma. So we had no idea. We had only inklings and rumors that there was something going on, but and a few photographs, aerial photographs, but we had no Enigma traffic or anything from that, because the SS just kept it all super secret in their own little encapsulated world. And other things like more diplomatic and political things, they were still kind of, well, no pun intended, but enigmatic to us. Okay. For example, when Hitler's on the 20th of July plot in 1944, and the German command, some German officers tried to kill Hitler and stage a coup. We didn't know that happened. We only figured it out a little later through captures of people and that sort of thing. It wasn't put on Enigma. So the point is that if you crack an enemy's code, you don't want to let on you've done that. Then you're in this paradox or this conundrum. How much information do I use from that, and how much information do I just let go to maintain the illusion that I've cracked your code, that I haven't cracked your code. So that, just giving you a little more background as I watched it, there were some things they took license with in terms of time. They compressed time, they expanded time in the film. I'm sitting here watching, Britain be bombed early in the war, and then the next thing they know, they cracked the code, and I'm thinking, well, how much time went by? And I had to kind of do some math and look some stuff up, and so they squished down time a bit during the film. But I didn't want to give away the plot. I mean, such as it is, that you already know some of the story. But I would point out that these kind of mechanical computational devices didn't just exist for the Germans. If you want to see an analog computer, a mechanical computer, there's one on the USS Pompano, which is up in San Francisco. That submarine that's on display there at Pier 39, believe it? No, Pier 42, 41, 42, somewhere out there. You can go there and visit it. It's a relic of World War II. Well, in the conning tower is an analog computer, a mechanical computer designed to compute what your settings are on your torpedoes, depending upon how far away the enemy ship you're shooting at. All you need is that information, the distance and your estimated speed of the enemy ship versus the speed of your submarine. And then you plug all that stuff in by buttons, pressing certain buttons on that thing, and then you turn a big crank. or you press, or if you do it mechanically, you turn a big crank, or you press the button for the power, and it goes. And it takes only a couple of moments to calculate out the number you need to put into the torpedo for it to detonate at a certain, the speed and the detonation time. So there were, America had things like this too. The Norton bomb sight was another example of that. On bombers, it was a mechanical computer to figure out exactly at what point do you release your bomb so that, when you drop a bomb, it goes forward because the plane's already going forward. So how long will it take to hit and so on? That was a mechanical computer. Also, by the way, top secret. And the Germans definitely wanted one of these things. And they didn't get a hold of one until about late 1944, when it didn't matter anymore. But they were hot to try to get one of our Norton bomb sights. So, all this kind of secrecy stuff is going on both sides. This was the most perplexing. And in the big scale of the war, cracking this code, yes, very much, they say, saved hundreds of thousands of lives and probably shortened the war by a couple of years, if you didn't know this. And the Japanese had a code as well in World War II. We cracked it before Pearl Harbor. Theirs was primitive compared to the Germans. And part of it is just the nature of language and so on. Theirs is a symbolic language, lots more symbols to try to encode. Whereas, as Dr. Ho said, you only had 26 letters to deal with. Well, for the Germans, a few more, but because they got a few more extra letters in there, but special letters, but still easier than a Japanese code. And so we cracked it because it was a pretty primitive code. But hopefully that helps you put a little more perspective in terms of history, military history. And I got you to 5. Good. No, I have a class to teach at San Jose State at 6 o'clock.
Cool. Okay.
These are yours.
Excuse me.
Well, thank you so much.
Sure,
I
sure.
appreciate it.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
So how about the Russians? This is more military code, right?
The Russians?
Okay,
Yeah,
and,
I watched the movie, the American.
So-
That one's more political.
Let's see. So Dr. Ho and Edith, I'm going to be turning off the
So,
Zoom here for
Enigma's
the movie, but
Turing is British.
Dr. Ho, thank you so much.
It's actually
Really
British.
appreciate, and it's so good to
You
see
should.
you. You're looking well.
Oh, no, I watched the American, the movie.
Take care.
They were hearing me, even.